I mean, not just the people, the kind of sad sack suckers who have been dragged into believing weird stuff about COVID, et cetera, but the people who are selling it, right? The people who are pushing this stuff, mostly the Republican Party. We're just over it. And so is Joe Biden, which is a real display of leadership on his part. I tip my hat to him, and it's going to bring me to my rant in just a moment about his leadership. We also, in the first hour today, Dino Badala is going to drop by. He's got an amazing 9/11 story to tell us. And, my colleague from SiriusXM here. And an awe moment that I want to share with you. And in our second hour, Ron DeSantis down in Florida blasted for cruelly denying hungry kids food. This has been going on since Rick Scott killed Charlene Dill, essentially. And the Republicans say that they hate big government, but they're inserting themselves into private business in a big way. I'll get to that in the second hour. And in our third hour, DeSantis goes all authoritarian, a whole nother horror show coming out of the GOP. But I want to start out with why these threats of violence are epidemic in America. We are witnessing today in America the symptoms, in my opinion, of a culture going through the early stages of transition from a pluralistic democracy to violent authoritarianism. And this is something that, when you look at the history of other countries where this has happened, goes from the top down. This really started with Donald Trump, which raises the question, will Joe Biden's leadership be enough to turn back the epidemic of asinine, frankly, and dangerous behavior that Donald Trump has unleashed? I mean, I start the piece out over at Hartmann Report this morning talking about how this was earlier in the week. I was literally sitting in my home office. I was working on the daily rant for the next morning. And I hear this guy out in my driveway shouting obscenities, you effing C word, for women. All these, actually several female-specific obscenities. And I'm like, what's going on? And so I went over to the window and looked down in the driveway. And here's this guy screaming obscenities at Louise, at my wife, and giving her the finger with both hands as he's getting into his car, and then he squeals out of the driveway and drives off. And I'm like, what happened? And she's like, well, we are getting a little bit of work done on the house, and she had a contractor come over and give her a bid. And when he got to the door, she said, I just want to make sure you're vaccinated before I let you in the house. And he just exploded in her face and just started screaming obscenities. I mean, she would have been, she told me later, she thought she had told him that on the phone, that, we don't let people who aren't vaccinated into the house. But she said if he had just said, no, I'm not, I'm sorry, she would have said, well, let me compensate you for, the hour of your time coming out here and seeing me and pick up your gas expenses or something. It was I should have said something. But she never had a chance to say anything like that, because he immediately started calling her these obscenities. I'm not going to repeat them. That happened to us this week. In Tennessee, a high school student, this has kind of gone viral around the internet, is speaking at a school board meeting. And he's telling a story of how his grandmother just died of COVID, his maternal grandmother, and he's concerned that if everybody in his school doesn't wear masks, that he might pick it up and carry it home and give it to his other grandmother. And a bunch of smirking, unmasked adults start heckling him and shouting him down. This kid in school in Tennessee. On JetBlue, another one that's gone viral in the last couple of days. This is a rite of passage now for flight attendants. Another drunk mask hole going ballistic because the flight attendant asked him to pull his mask up over his nose, and he's like, oh my God. In Tacoma, Washington, a group of thugs go out looking for a fight with Antifa that they had advertised. Hey, Antifa, come meet us. And they get there and there's no Antifa. So they go roaming around town with baseball bats and flagpoles and stuff, looking for people to beat up. And apparently some local guy, not Antifa, but just somebody who was just sick and tired of it, shoots one of them in the foot. Well, there are some theories that the guy shot himself in the foot. But, I mean, it's like, really? Vigilantes on our street in small town, in Tacoma, Washington. In Fort Collins, Colorado, this guy, there's they've got a beach there, and there's these, or near Fort Collins, and and a couple of young women are laying on the beach in their bikinis, and this guy comes up to them and starts ranting at them about how they're showing too much skin, and they should cover themselves up. This is pornographic. And they're like, go away, leave us alone. Don't look if you don't want. And he's like, no, I can stand here and harass you. This is America. Poll workers across the country are literally getting over 100 death threats that have been confirmed, where they know who did it, they know that it happened, they know that these were real threats. So far, nobody has been arrested, which is mind-boggling. But poll workers are getting threatened, secretaries of state are getting threatened, school boards are getting death threats, and this is just the past week. So what the hell is going on here? Well, this continuous and increasing use of violence and threats of violence, which has become an epidemic, is not because people are upset about the pandemic. This goes back 4 years. This goes back to the beginning, to Trump becoming president of the United States. And this is what happens in every country that makes that transition from being a democratic and generally egalitarian and respectful culture into being one that embraces authoritarian fascism, essentially. And it always starts from the top down. It always starts from the leadership. And in this case, these people are imitating Donald Trump. Frankly, I think our best hope is that Joe Biden, with his compassionate, thoughtful, intelligent leadership style, is going to nip this in the bud and America can recover and go back to being America. But, this doesn't look good. I mean, down in Texas, you've got there's a bunch of Republicans trying to just keep going in that authoritarian, neo-fascist direction. Down in Texas, they just passed a law encouraging vigilantism against women. I mean, and you look around the world at how this happens. When Viktor Orban was rising to power in Hungary, there were mobs that were wandering around Budapest with torches going up to the homes of Roma people, the people that used to be called gypsies, and now it's kind of a slur, but so you know what I'm talking about. Threatening to burn their houses down. In the Philippines, little Donald Trump Duterte, President Duterte, has praised vigilantes. I mean, this is just a couple of weeks ago, praised vigilantes roaming the streets with clubs and guns looking to beat up or kill people. He named 150 judges, mayors, lawmakers, police, and military personnel, said these people are associated with drugs. He said, please feel free to call us or the police, or do it yourself if you have a gun. You have my support. These people were all his political opponents. In Russia, they're attacking gay people, LGBTQ people, as the leadership of that country ramps up their otherizing language. And this is happening across former Soviet states, particularly where advocates for democracy or for gay rights are being beaten or killed. This is what happened when Mussolini came to power started rising to power in 1921 in Italy. He had this paramilitary, unpaid volunteer paramilitary group. They called them the Black Shirts. And they would just terrorize people. In Germany in 21, the same thing with Hitler, with his Sturmabteilung, the storm unit. Again, voluntary, unpaid civilian militias. In Brazil right now, they call them militias in Brazil. They roam the streets killing and beating people up who are perceived to be the political enemies of Trump imitator Jair Bolsonaro. And according to reporting in The Intercept and The Guardian, they're being led by Bolsonaro's eldest son, Flavio. In every case around the world and throughout history, regular citizens are first surprised. How come everybody's behaving nuts? Then shocked, then intimidated, and finally, if you don't get that leadership out and get decent leadership in, finally dominated by this emerging authoritarian or neo-fascist movement. And in every case, these everyday actions like traveling on a bus or a train or an airplane or hiring a contractor or just walking through town become a minefield filled with unpredictable eruptions and threats of violence and intimidation. Milton Mayer, I've quoted him so many times, he wrote, they thought they were free. Went to Germany in the 1950s, late 1940s, early 1950s, right after World War II. And he wrote in They Thought They Were Free, he said, if I and my countrymen ever succumbed to that concatenation of conditions, no constitution, no laws, no police, and certainly no army would be able to protect us from harm. We are witnessing today the symptoms of a culture going through the early stages of the transition from egalitarian and pluralistic democracy to violent oligarchy. And it quite literally starts with average people just randomly exploding and behaving like total asses while political demagogues promote self-styled militias, lawlessness, and vigilantism. This is how it begins. And we ignore or minimize or ridicule these people at our own peril. So just wanted to put that warning down, that marker. If you want to read the whole rant with the links to everything that I talked about, it's over at HartmannReport.com this morning.